The palace on the distant planet was enormous, stretching high into the sky with shining walls that reflected the light of its twin suns. It was a place of beauty and order, filled with the hum of machines and the soft steps of attendants moving quickly from one task to another. Yet despite all its elegance and technology, the palace had a problem that nothing could fix. The alien princess's baby cried endlessly. From the moment the child was born, the cries had started. The sound was piercing, high-pitched, and persistent. No one could understand why the baby cried so much. The palace staff tried everything. Robotic arms gently rocked the baby in special cradles. Machines produced soothing lights that changed color in patterns meant to calm infants. Soft music, played in melodies carefully composed to appeal to the alien ear, floated through the nursery. Yet no matter what they tried, the crying never stopped. The princess, though young and strong, felt a helplessness she had never known before. She had been trained all her life to lead her people, to make decisions that affected entire worlds, to appear calm and confident no matter the situation. But standing over her child, listening to the constant wailing, she realized she was powerless, in a way she had never been before. Her heart ached each time she heard the baby's cries, and she began to wonder if something was wrong with her child. Doctors and scientists came from every corner of her star system. They examined the baby with advanced scanning tools, measuring every heartbeat, every movement, every breath. They looked for illnesses, for weaknesses, for anything that could explain why the baby was never satisfied. Some suggested that perhaps the child's senses were too sensitive to the lights in the palace, or that the food being used in feeding tubes was not right. Others thought it might be a rare condition, something that even the most advanced medical knowledge could not easily cure. The princess watched them all, her eyes filled with worry. She had been raised to trust her advisors and experts, but she began to feel frustration creeping in. How could it be that in a palace filled with the smartest minds and the most advanced technology, no one could help her child? Each passing hour of crying seemed to make the problem worse. She found herself walking the halls at night, carrying the baby in her arms, hoping that maybe her presence alone could calm the child. But even then, the crying never truly stopped. The palace itself seemed to echo with the sound. Guards on duty reported that the cries could be heard even in distant wings, and attendants admitted that their focus was broken, their work slowed by the constant noise. Courtiers whispered among themselves, sharing theories and fears. Some suggested that the baby's cries were a sign of a curse, a warning from the stars. Others worried that perhaps the princess had made a mistake in her choice of partner, though such thoughts were not spoken aloud in front of her. Despite all of this, the princess did not blame anyone. She loved her baby with a deep and fierce devotion. She spent hours trying to soothe the child herself, learning new techniques, changing routines, and even speaking in whispers that only the baby could hear. She tried to feed the baby at different times in different positions with different methods. She sang songs she had learned from her mother, songs meant to calm a baby's mind and spirit. But still, the crying persisted, and the princess began to feel a heaviness she had never known. At times, she wondered if she was failing as a mother. She had been praised her whole life for her intelligence, her courage, her ability to lead. Yet here in the nursery, she felt inadequate. Her advisors could fix political problems. Her soldiers could defend the palace. Her scientists could solve nearly any technical challenge. But no one, not even the princess herself, could fix the one problem that mattered most to her: the unhappiness of her baby. The baby's cries changed the rhythm of life in the palace. No longer was it a place of calm order. Even in the grand dining halls where important meetings were held with diplomats and leaders from other planets, the sound of the baby's crying could sometimes be heard faintly, a reminder that the smallest life could have the greatest impact. The princess's own schedule became unpredictable, as she was constantly needed in the nursery, attending to the child's needs, hoping that something would finally work. And then one day, a new report reached the princess. A human soldier, visiting from a distant star system, was scheduled to arrive at the palace. The princess had never met a human before, and she had heard little about their ways. Some described humans as brave, some as primitive, some as unpredictable. There was no way to know if this soldier could help. But in her heart, the princess knew that any chance, no matter how small, was worth trying. She prepared the nursery, making it as comfortable as possible, and watched anxiously as the human soldier approached. She did not understand why, but a strange feeling filled her chest. Hope. Perhaps this outsider, this stranger from a faraway world, could see something that no one else could. Perhaps this human could do what no one else had managed. Calm her baby and bring peace to the palace once more. As the soldier entered the nursery, the princess held the crying baby close. She whispered softly to the child, hoping for a miracle, hoping that after so many days and nights of endless cries, the baby might finally find comfort. The palace, usually filled with confidence and control, held its breath. Everyone, from the highest-ranking officials to the lowest attendants, wondered if anything could change what had seemed unchangeable. And so, the endless crying of the alien, Princess's baby, became not just a problem of noise, not just a challenge for medicine and technology, but a test of hope, patience, and the possibility that sometimes the simplest solution could come from the most unexpected place. The princess, weary but determined, waited for what might be the beginning of something extraordinary. The human soldier stepped into the palace, his boots clicking softly against the polished floor. He was tall and strong, but there was nothing frightening about him. His eyes were calm, steady, and filled with a quiet patience that seemed unusual in the busy, tense palace. The attendants whispered to each other as he passed, some curious, some skeptical. Many had never seen a human before. To them, humans were distant, strange creatures from another star system, not known for sophistication or advanced knowledge. They were often described as brave, but simple, and it was difficult for the palace staff to imagine that one of them could make any difference. The princess watched the soldier carefully from across the room. She held her crying baby close to her chest, the child's tiny arms flailing and mouth opening in another high-pitched wail. She had seen many experts try to soothe the baby, all failing, and she felt a flicker of doubt. Could a human really help? Still, something about the soldier's calm demeanor gave her hope. He moved slowly without any sudden gestures, as though he understood that rushing or forcing anything would only make the situation worse. The soldier bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he had learned from observing other alien cultures before his visit. "Your Highness," he said softly, his voice low and steady. "I am here to help if you will allow me." The princess hesitated. She was used to orders being given and followed, to plans being executed with precision. But this soldier did not command, he asked. She sensed no pride, no arrogance, only a willingness to help. Slowly she nodded, and the attendants moved aside, giving the soldier space to approach the baby. He looked down at the child with gentle eyes, noticing things the machines and doctors had missed. The baby's breathing was uneven, but not from illness, just anxiety. The child's tiny hands were tense, and the cry was not one of hunger or pain, but of fear and discomfort. The soldier spoke softly, almost whispering, using a tone that seemed to carry calmness like a wave. He reached out his hand slowly, allowing the baby to see him and smell his presence before touching. The princess watched carefully, holding her breath. The room was silent except for the baby's wailing. The soldier moved patiently, never forcing the baby, letting the child take in his presence. He adjusted his posture, sat down carefully on the soft cushions of the nursery floor, and continued speaking in quiet, simple phrases. His words were not alien, but something in the tone, the rhythm, and the warmth seemed to reach the baby in a way no technology ever had. Minutes passed. The princess began to feel a strange sensation, a sense of hope she had not felt for days. She could see the baby's cries beginning to change. The high-pitched, urgent sound became less sharp, less frantic. The child's arms, which had been stiff and flailing, began to relax slightly. The princess's eyes widened. Could it be? Could a human, a stranger from another world, actually do what no one else could? The soldier smiled gently, careful not to make sudden movements. He reached slowly for the baby, letting the child feel his hands and his calm energy. As he held the baby closer, rocking ever so lightly, something remarkable happened. The cries softened even more, replaced with little whimpers, and then quiet coos. The attendants gasped softly, and some had tears in their eyes. They had never seen anything like this. Machines, medicines, alien experts, nothing had worked. But this human soldier with no advanced technology and no special training in alien infants was managing to soothe the baby with patience, presence, and warmth. The princess felt tears welling in her eyes. She had never imagined that such a simple approach could work, yet here it was. The baby's tiny body relaxed completely, eyes blinking slowly in calm observation, fingers curling gently around the soldier's hands. For the first time since birth, the child seemed at peace. The princess could hardly believe what she was seeing. She wanted to speak, to ask how this was possible, but words failed her. Instead, she simply watched, her heart full of wonder and relief. The soldier did not rush the process. He knew that sudden changes or forceful actions could scare the baby again. He simply stayed calm, patient, and present. He continued to hum softly, a melody simple yet soothing, not from any alien culture but from human instinct. And slowly the palace, which had been filled with tension and worry, seemed to breathe easier. The constant noise that had filled every corner of the nursery began to fade. Other staff members leaned in quietly, watching and learning. They noticed the small details, the soldier's gentle movements, the way he spoke in a steady rhythm, how he let the baby take time to adjust to his presence. They realized that perhaps in all their sophistication, they had overlooked something fundamental. It was not always advanced technology or complex methods that brought comfort, but sometimes something much simpler: calmness, patience, and care. The princess, still holding her baby, finally spoke. How did you know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The soldier looked up at her, his expression kind and understanding. "Sometimes it's not about knowing," he said softly. "It's about being patient and letting the child feel safe. That's all they need." The princess nodded slowly, feeling a warmth in her chest she had not felt in weeks. She realized that this soldier, this human from another world, had not only calmed her baby but had also taught her something important: that sometimes the simplest acts of care could achieve what the most advanced technology could not. Minutes turned into hours, and the baby slept peacefully in the soldier's arms. The princess marveled at the transformation. The palace, once filled with the cries of a restless infant, was now quiet, filled only with the gentle hum of life and relief. Courtiers and attendants exchanged amazed looks, many realizing that perhaps their understanding of care, nurturing, and patience needed to grow. When the soldier finally prepared to hand the baby back to the princess, the child stirred slightly, but did not cry. Instead, the baby reached out, fingers touching the soldier's hand in a gesture almost like gratitude. The princess held her child close, feeling a deep and unspoken connection, not only with her child, but with the human soldier who had come from across the stars to bring peace to their world. In that moment, the princess understood something profound. The human soldier had shown that sometimes love and patience could cross the boundaries of species, culture, and knowledge. Even in a palace filled with technology and brilliance, the simplest presence, the gentle touch, and the quiet patience of one human had changed everything. The palace would never forget that day. The baby's cries had stopped, replaced by calm and trust, and the princess's heart was filled with gratitude and awe. She knew that this encounter would shape the way she cared for her child and how her people would understand care and nurture for generations to come. The days that followed were different from anything the palace had ever experienced. The alien princess watched in amazement as her baby, who had cried endlessly before, began to show signs of calmness and curiosity. The small infant's eyes, once wide with distress, now sparkled with interest. The tiniest movements of the baby seemed filled with wonder, as if the world itself had become a place worth exploring. And at the center of this change was the human soldier, whose presence had brought a new kind of comfort the palace had never known. Every morning, the princess would carry her baby to the nursery, where the soldier waited. He had remained at the palace at the princess's request, though he was technically there only for a short diplomatic visit. Yet, seeing the transformation in the baby, he had agreed to stay longer. The palace staff still whispered among themselves, curious and amazed. How could one human, with no special tools or knowledge of alien culture, have such a profound effect on the child? The soldier's approach was simple but effective. He never rushed the baby, never forced attention, and never made sudden movements. He would sit quietly, letting the baby notice him, letting the child explore his face and hands in its own time. Sometimes he hummed gentle tunes from his home world, simple songs that carried warmth and familiarity. Other times he simply held the baby close, letting the small body feel the steady beat of his heart and the warmth of his hands. The princess observed all of this closely. She noticed that her own approach, which had relied on careful routines, machines, and precise methods, now seemed too complicated. The soldier's calmness, patience, and quiet presence worked better than all the advanced technology in the palace. She began to understand something important. Nurturing was not just about knowledge or tools. It was about understanding, empathy, and connection. As the days passed, the baby's behavior changed in remarkable ways. The small infant began to respond to voices, following movement with its eyes. Tiny hands reached out to touch the soldier, grasping his fingers without fear. Smiles and coos replaced the high-pitched cries that had filled the nursery. Even the palace staff could not help but notice the difference. The once tense atmosphere was now filled with quiet joy, with soft laughter, and with the gentle sounds of a baby exploring its world. The princess herself felt a change within her. She had been consumed by worry, fear, and helplessness, but now she felt hope and gratitude. Watching the soldier interact with her child, she began to learn. She copied his gentle movements, the way he spoke softly, and the patience with which he let the baby lead the interaction. She realized that being a mother was not just about providing food, safety, and shelter. It was about presence, attention, and love. The bond between the soldier and the baby grew stronger every day. The infant seemed to recognize him, calming, immediately at his touch or voice. Courtiers and attendants marveled at the sight. Many had worked with the palace's most advanced technology and had never seen such a quick and lasting effect. It was clear that the human soldier had an instinctive understanding of care, something that transcended species. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the nursery windows, the princess watched quietly from a corner. The soldier held her, baby in his arms, rocking gently, speaking in low, soothing tones. The infant rested its head against the soldier's chest, eyes half closed, content and peaceful. For the first time, the princess felt a true sense of relief. The crying that had haunted her for weeks was gone. In its place was calm, curiosity, and trust. The staff began to notice other changes as well. The baby, once fearful of strangers, now allowed others to approach without distress. The cries that had once echoed through the palace halls were replaced with soft babbles and playful sounds. Even the palace walls seemed less oppressive, as if the change in the infant's mood had a subtle effect on everything around it. People moved more freely, spoke more softly, and smiled more often. The soldier had not only helped the baby, he had transformed the atmosphere of the entire palace. The princess began to spend more time observing the soldier, learning from him. She asked questions, curious about his methods and approach. How did he remain so calm? How did he know when to act and when to wait? The soldier answered simply, saying, "I don't know if I know. I just try to be patient, to notice what the baby needs, and to respect the child's feelings. Sometimes that is enough." The princess realized the wisdom in his words. Her people had relied heavily on technology, on rules and routines, and on knowledge accumulated over centuries. Yet this simple human approach, patience, attention, and empathy, had achieved what none of that could. She began to understand that care and love were universal languages, not bound by species or culture. The days continued in this way, each one building on the progress of the last. The baby explored new sounds, responded to touch, and even began to mimic small movements. The soldier guided gently, never pushing too far, always letting the infant decide what was comfortable. The princess learned to follow his example, seeing the importance of letting the baby take the lead. She marveled at the small but significant gestures, a reaching hand, a coo of recognition, a tiny smile that could light up the entire room. The palace staff grew more confident as well. They began to see that sometimes the simplest approaches were the most effective. They started incorporating the soldiers' methods into their own care routines, learning to observe, to be patient, and to respect the infant's needs. The palace, once tense and filled with worry, now felt like a place of warmth, curiosity, and learning. By the end of the week, the alien princess could hardly believe the transformation. Her baby, who had cried endlessly just days before, now laughed softly, reached out for others, and responded to the world with interest rather than fear. The human soldier had not only calmed her child but had taught the princess and her people something deeper, that love, patience, and presence could bridge worlds, species, and cultures. And through it all, the princess felt something she had never felt before: hope. She realized that the baby's first days of crying, though difficult, had led to a moment of profound discovery. The human soldier's arrival had changed everything, showing that sometimes solutions do not come from power, technology, or rules, but from kindness, understanding, and the simple act of being present. The princess watched as the soldier gently placed the baby back into her arms, the infant looking up at her with calm, trusting eyes. She smiled, feeling a connection not just with her child, but with this human who had shown them all a new way of seeing care. The palace, once filled with endless cries and worry, was now filled with quiet joy and the promise of new beginnings. The days in the palace grew brighter with every passing moment. The human soldier's presence had brought a new rhythm to the nursery, and the changes were beginning to influence the entire palace. The once tense halls now carried a quiet energy of curiosity and learning. Courtiers, attendants, and even the palace guards noticed the difference. Something about the soldier's calm and patient demeanor was contagious. The alien princess watched with wonder as her baby began to explore the world in small but meaningful ways. The infant reached out to touch objects, responded to soft voices, and even giggled when amused by simple movements. It was as though the baby had discovered joy for the first time. And at the center of it all was the soldier, sitting quietly on the nursery floor, letting the child take the lead while offering support and comfort whenever needed. The princess realized that she too had changed. She had learned from the soldier not only how to calm her baby, but also how to see the world differently. She had been so focused on routines, technology, and perfect methods that she had forgotten the value of presence and patience. Watching the soldier interact with her child, she began to understand that leadership and care were not always about control. They were about guidance, attention, and empathy. The palace staff began to follow the soldier's example. Nurses and attendants watched him carefully, noting how he waited for the baby to respond, how he used gentle motions, and how he spoke softly, rather than giving commands. They began to apply these methods themselves, seeing how even the smallest gestures could bring comfort and joy. Machines and devices once relied upon entirely were now used as secondary tools, with human care taking priority. The palace was slowly learning a new way to nurture life. Even the courtiers were affected. They had often believed that humans were simple and primitive, but now they witnessed a wisdom that could not be measured in technology or knowledge alone. The soldier's approach, though straightforward, showed them that emotional intelligence and patience could create results far beyond expectation. Conversations in the halls began to shift. People discussed how they might apply these lessons not just to infants but to their work, relationships, and leadership. The princess found herself reflecting deeply. She realized that the soldier had done more than calm her baby. He had shown her a new perspective on care, connection, and trust. She began to practice these lessons herself, sitting quietly with her child, observing without rushing, listening carefully to the baby's needs, and responding with patience and love. The infant, sensing this change, became even more open and trusting, cooing and reaching for the princess with joy. One afternoon, the princess gathered her closest advisors and staff. She wanted to share what she had learned from the human soldier. She spoke of patience, observation, and the importance of presence. At first, some of them were skeptical, unsure how simple actions could replace the palace's advanced methods. But as they watched the baby interact with the soldier and the princess, they could not deny the results. Gradually, they began to understand and apply these lessons in their own work. The palace itself seemed to transform. Spaces that had once felt tense and mechanical now felt warm and alive. Soft laughter and gentle sounds filled the halls, replacing the background hum of anxiety that had dominated before. The baby's presence, once a source of stress, had become a source of joy and inspiration. Everyone, from the highest-ranking official to the newest attendant, was affected by the peaceful energy the soldier had introduced. Even the alien princess began to see the broader implications. She realized that the lessons learned here could extend beyond the nursery, influencing how her people interacted with one another and with visitors from other worlds. Care, patience, and understanding were not just methods for calming a child. They were principles that could guide relationships, diplomacy, and leadership. The human soldier had introduced an idea more powerful than any technology: the power of connection. By the end of the week, the palace had a new rhythm. The baby played, explored, and laughed under the gentle guidance of the princess and the human soldier. The staff followed new routines based on observation and patience. The halls, once tense and quiet, now hummed with a gentle energy. The princess looked at her child and then at the soldier, gratitude shining in her eyes. She knew that this experience had changed not just her child but the entire palace, teaching them all a lesson they would carry for a lifetime. The day came when the human soldier had to leave. The princess and her staff had grown attached, and even the baby seemed to recognize that something was different. The soldier had become more than a visitor. He had become a teacher, a guide, and a friend. The palace felt a mix of joy and sadness. As they prepared to say goodbye, the princess held her baby in her arms, watching the soldier carefully. The infant looked calm, happy, and secure, an incredible change from the endless cries of the past. The princess felt a deep gratitude. She knew that the calm, trusting presence her baby now enjoyed was a gift from the human, a gift that went beyond simple care. It was a gift of understanding, patience, and love. The soldier knelt before the princess and her child. "Your Highness," he said softly, "it has been an honor to be here. I came to help, but I have learned much as well. Remember, presence and patience can change the world even in ways we cannot predict." The princess smiled, tears in her eyes. "You have changed our lives," she replied, "not just for my baby, but for all of us in this palace. We will never forget what you have done." As the soldier stood and prepared to leave, the baby reached out, tiny hands touching his. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. The child had formed a bond, a connection that transcended words, species, and worlds. The soldier smiled, understanding the significance, and gently waved goodbye. Even after the human soldier left, his influence remained. The princess continued to practice the lessons he had taught: patience, observation, empathy, and the importance of letting the child lead. The palace staff adopted these practices in their own care, and the environment of the palace continued to flourish. What had begun as a simple act of care had grown into a lasting culture of kindness and understanding. The baby thrived. Laughter replaced crying, curiosity replaced fear, and trust replaced anxiety. The princess often reflected on those first difficult days, realizing how far they had come. She understood that sometimes the smallest presence, the gentle hand, the quiet voice, could make the biggest difference. The story of the human soldier spread throughout the palace and beyond. Visitors from other worlds heard of the miraculous change, and many came to witness it for themselves. The lesson was simple but profound. Care, patience, and empathy could bridge gaps that knowledge and technology alone could not. The human had shown them a new way of living and understanding, and it had lasting effects on the people of the palace. Years later, when the baby had grown into a joyful, confident child, the princess would tell the story to remind everyone of what they had learned. She would speak of a human soldier who had come from a distant world and changed their lives not with power, not with tools, but with kindness, patience, and love. And she would remember the day the endless crying stopped, replaced by calm, joy, and trust. The day that showed that even across worlds, connection could make all the difference. The palace, once tense and worried, had become a place of warmth, learning, and hope. The princess smiled often, her heart full of gratitude, and she knew that the lessons of that time would guide her for the rest of her life. The human soldier had left, but the impact of his presence remained forever, a gentle reminder that even the smallest actions, when done with care and attention, could change the course of life. And so life continued in the palace, but nothing was ever quite the same. The infant who had once cried endlessly now laughed, played, and thrived. The princess, once worried and helpless, had learned the power of patience and presence, and the human soldier, a visitor from a distant star, had left a mark on an entire world, proving that love and care know no boundaries.